We have to talk about this. Speaking of politics, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he's set to announce his 2024 presidential bid this evening. He's going to do it on Twitter. CEO Elon Musk is going to host the Twitter Spaces interview with DeSantis, who is seen as Donald Trump's main rival for the Republican nomination. That event brings back to the fore the idea of Twitter becoming a media platform. And it's a good time to have Dave Kerr with us because NPR had its own back and forth with Twitter earlier this year. David, this had to do with labeling NPR a state-sponsored media organization. And it's interesting now because I guess effectively Twitter might see itself also as a competitor to some of the traditional media organizations. This really seems like a win for DeSantis to roll out his campaign in this way. I don't know. How are you thinking about this whole situation?
Yeah, I think it's getting a lot of attention. It's a novel way of doing it. I'm sure he'll do kind of an in-person event after this, but it's certainly attracted attention just because it is novel. It is new doing it in this forum. And with Elon Musk, who's fashioned himself an inventor, an executive, sort of a media tycoon, and now, I guess, interlocutor and kingmaker of politicians as well. So we'll see how the interview goes. And you bring up sort of what happened with NPR, and sort of speaking for myself as I watched all of this unfold. He labeled NPR as state-funded media, changed that to state-aligned media. And I think that what the organization for which I work found out is that Musk has a kind of a limited sense of what he intends to do with the platform. And so NPR was kind of seeking answers on what how he was making these characterizations, what they meant, obviously pushing back on the ones that were wrong. And there was a plasticity of the way that he was running the company that I think was troubling to NPR and other media organizations as well. I think that's emblematic of sort of where we are with this platform. He is very present, as we all know, weighing in on politics more than he said he would. And he continues to say that he wants it to be this kind of town hall forum where people with different opinions can make announcements and debate one another. A lot of people have pushed back on sort of how freely that's happening and who's able to do that, and certainly sort of what's allowed into the public square where he is the de facto mayor. I'll say, just again, going back to sort of our experience with how this worked out, there's no way of accessing policymakers at Twitter now. It really is kind of a one-man shop. And so you just showed a tweet there by my colleague, Bobby Allen, who's a tech reporter for us here at NPR. He's had this kind of on-again, off-again email correspondence with Elon Musk, where, lo and behold, he replied to an email from Bobby about the first way that he labeled NPR. They went back and forth for a time. Of course, the labeling changed. Then there was silence, and he came back once again. So it's a weird thing to have that level of access and to see an executive who's involved so granularly in the operations of a company. I'm going on and on here, but I think that it just kind of represents the fact that he's still kind of finding his way around what he wants to do with it, and certainly getting attention and more people to use the platform seems like one that's quite logical if he's hoping to pay the debt that he owes for the company.
To your point, David, we saw Tucker Carlson recently do, kind of a I'm back on Twitter. And now with DeSantis coming there for an announcement later today, which is expected to be a announcement for a presidential bid. What does that signal in terms of the political leanings of Musk and Twitter?
Just as I observe it, I think that he is interested in kind of stirring up controversy. He seems libertarian. He has a lot of friends who are venture capitalists in the Bay Area who are libertarian. I see things like that kind of voice is getting a lot more presence on the platform. But I think, candidly, he likes the attention, and he likes the fact that he's having a role here in shaping, obviously, what's going to be a critical election here in the next year. We saw him retweet something from Senator Tim Scott earlier this week announcing his decision to run for president. He said in the past that he's admiring of Ron DeSantis, and maybe this is that. I mean, he's a confusing person to pin down when it comes to politics, of course, because he said he voted for President Biden in the last election. Now we're seeing him kind of making overtures to these Republican candidates. So I think that as there's squishiness about sort of the direction of the platform itself, there is this also squishiness just about his sort of political leanings and whom he supports, and sort of how he intends to play this as the election takes shape and the campaign begins in earnest.
Right. And to be clear, we know he's hosting this conversation today, but we don't know if he's actually endorsing DeSantis. It doesn't seem like that is automatically happening. Tony, I want to bring you back into this and just ask you more broadly about, I know it's early to think about the presidential race as it relates to markets. We got to get through the debt ceiling. We got to get through a lot of other stuff first. But I am curious if you've started to think about that at all, or at least as how the sort of political climate in the U.S. relates back to markets.
Yes, and first on the calendar, though, in 2024 is the Taiwan election, and it could shape how events go geopolitically. But probably more importantly in the next cycle will be how President reimagines the global order, because it's changing, it's being reshaped, it's being reset. For example, companies are deciding to look at matters through a national security lens, to think about their supply chains. Should they source items, goods from China, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a rewiring underway. Now, so the next administration will have to think about how can we how can it benefit the United States? Could we have what Dwight D. Eisenhower did in the 1950s and 60s when he established the Eisenhower Interstate and Defense Highway System, it was called. They used the word defense to justify the spending on an investment of 50,000 miles of roadway we all still use and we have seen benefit from for decades. So will there be something like that ahead? So it's going to be a critical moment in that sense because we are reimagining, reshaping, resetting the global order, and you want to see it done in an intelligent way to bring about faster growth for Americans.
Just quickly, we've seen obviously some reshoring efforts already on the part of this administration. Is that good for the U.S. economy and for the markets? And do you think even if we get a change in administration that they might continue that kind of push?
It can be good, all of that investment, if it's done wisely. We know that growth is determined by three sources. It's people, our skills, our education, et cetera. Secondly, the things we put in place. I mentioned the roadways. And third, what they call total factor productivity, TFP. How we use people's skills, how we use the things in place to be productive. So if we use it wisely, and I think we're all focused, but we all need to focus together, but there isn't a lot of togetherness these days. So that's where I get a little worried.
There isn't a lot of togetherness. David Gura, great to get some time with you here this morning. NPR correspondent on the business desk. Hope to see you again soon.
Yes.
Togetherness.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Indeed.